Welcome to Rewrite Rising, the podcast where you can rewrite your health journey and rise above your past. I'm Drew, sharing Mindset Mondays to ground and guide you, Thriving Thursdays to cut through the noise and bring clarity to nutrition. If you find these conversations helpful or think someone else would enjoy them too, make sure that you are subscribed. Whether you're tuning into YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else, feel free to share them along the way. All right, let's get into today's episode. Okay, think about the word diet. Like, it's everywhere, isn't it? Ancient ideas all the way to your Instagram feed. It feels like there is always some new rule about eating or not eating or how to eat or how to exercise or how to do it. We're constantly bombarded with messages about healthy body and how you're supposed to look and how to get there. Now, just to give you a sense of scale, at any one time, there are about 2.3 million Australians on the diet. And that number really shows how deep this whole thing runs, especially when you zoom out and see the trends over the last couple hundred years. It shows how much this thinking has kind of sunk into our society. So that is the mission of today's episodes, to pull back the curtain, so-called diet culture thing. I want to dig in where it came from and how it's changed over the centuries, and its impact on both mental and physical, and maybe the big question, does science and anthropology actually say about how humans are meant to eat? And my goal is to kind of give you knowledge so that you can use to navigate all this complicated messaging that's constantly flying around you and me. So for this, I'll be drawing on academic work about the science of diet culture, historical timelines that trace it back, and research on digital mental health tools, and some fascinating anthropological studies on how the human diet evolved. Ready? Okay, let's kind of unpack this. Now, we know diet is persuasive, but what exactly is diet culture and why does it have its hold on us? Now, at its heart, diet culture is a belief system that puts thinness and appearance way above actual health and well-being. It pushes the idea that being thin automatically means you're healthy, which is not true. And because of that, it promotes calorie counting, restriction, fad diets that you possibly can't sustain, and labeling foods such as good for you to lose fat or bad for you to gain fat. Even the word diet has changed itself over time. So originally, it simply meant the sum of everything that you ate or drank, your pattern of eating, your specific pattern of eating. So like the Chinese diet, the American diet, the French diet, what you ate diet, the Drew diet, me, the Drew diet, the you diet. It's literally what it meant. So it wasn't until the early 1900s that it shifted into restricting food specifically to lose weight or change your body. Like, in other words, the word itself was actually hijacked, moving from describing what you eat to describing how you restrict. Fad diets. Well, they're one of the clearest signs of diet culture. They promise rapid weight loss with almost no effort and usually have zero scientific backing. They rely on testimonials instead of evidence. They restrict you to an unbalanced list of allowed quote-unquote foods and often include some miracle product or supplement that they sell. To understand how we got here, we gotta need to go back in time. Jeez. Come on, he's the father of modern nutrition and health. And all right, 400 BCE, he talked about changing your diet of health. He emphasized that moderation and exercise never really pushed for extreme weight loss. So like in ancient Greece, the ideal body weight was about what it could do, its abilities, not how it looked. So thinness for its own sake wasn't actually the goal. And by the time of wealthy Romans, though, we actually could see kind of a little bit of different attitudes. Lavish feasts were common, and some would purge just to keep eating. It wasn't dieting in the modern sense, but it showed early links between food control and social status. If we fast forward to medieval periods, and food became tied up with religion and virtue. Extreme fasting was a sign of devotion, and gluttony was considered a sin. Women were often praised for abstaining from food, and sometimes to the point of starvation. The moralizing of food, equating restriction with goodness, set a stage for guilt and shame that we still experience today. Now came the 19th century and the birth of modern dieting, when in 1863, William Banting wrote a letter on Corpulence, one of the first modern diet books. He promoted low-carb eating because it worked for him personally, which essentially made him one of the first diet gurus. The Victoria era cemented ideals like tiny waists for women and achieved with corsets and food restriction. Thinness became associated with refinement and self-control. Disturbingly, it was also when the first weight loss drugs appeared, some containing arsenic and strychnine, which meant people were really willing to risk death for the promise of a quick fix, which, believe it or not, we still do today. Now, even celebrities influenced diet trends. Lord Byron popularized the vinegar diet, where he drank vinegar mixed with water and ate potatoes soaked in vinegar. Women actually died trying to copy him. Empress Sisi of Austria starved herself and over-exercised to maintain her frail look. These were original influencers of dieting. It wasn't just the extremes like that. In 1825, books like The Psychology of Taste were already advocating versions of low-carb eating that sounded a lot like paleo, keto, and Atkins today. Even chewing fads like Fletcherism, which chewing each bite 32 times and spitting it out, showed how far people will go. Like some baby birdie thing going on over there. Now, the 20th century turned dieting into a massive industry. The 1920s Flapper Ideal promoted thin, boyish figures. Men magazines and women's magazines reinforced it. Weight Watchers launched in 1963. Slim Fast 1977. Processed diet foods filled the market. Amphetamines were prescribed for weight loss, which created a massive wave of addiction. Now, in the 1970s and 80s, brought a fad diet explosion. Grapefruit diets, cabbage soup diets, even the Sleeping Beauty diet, where people were sedated so they could not eat. And this is the era that also demonized fat, which, believe it or not, you need fat to live, leading to a flood of fat-free processed foods loaded with sugar instead. Because if you take out fat from food, it's going to taste disgusting, so they add sugar so it doesn't. Yay. Now, celebrities like Jane Fonda and Richard Simmons reinforced the message that thinness equals success. By the 2000s, diet culture rebranded itself as wellness. Suddenly, it was all about detoxes, cleanses, superfoods, and eating clean. But it still moralized food, making people feel guilty for eating the wrong thing. So social media poured gasoline on the fire with endless comparison to influencers of perfection. Yeah, the model on Instagram, it's probably fake. At the time, counter movements emerged: intuitive eating, health at every size, body positivity. They pushed back against dieting, encouraged people to accept their bodies and to heal their relationships with food. Still, the diet industry adapted, promoting trends in intermittent fasting or keto, as well as wellness quote-unquote choices, same restrictions, new packaging. Now, today, weight loss drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy are everywhere, offering rapid results but reinforcing the same obsession with thinness. Outline what I eat in a day videos, biohacking trends, keep fueling restrictions cultures. They're just under new names. So really, what are the consequences? Well, mentally, diet culture takes a massive toll. It is strongly linked to eating disorders, anxiety, and depression. Constant pressure makes people feel like failures if they don't eat impossible ideals. Physically, fad diets often cause nutrient deficiency, like yo-yo weight cycling and long-term metabolic issues. Diet pills have caused devastating health problems and even death. And the stats are actually really chilling. So the National Eating Disorders Association reports that 35% of teens and young adults who diet frequently develop an obsession. For about a quarter of them, it becomes a full-blown eating disorder. Now, food becomes moralized into good or bad, shame and guilt creep in. Even healthy eating obsessions can spiral into orthorexia, where the pursuit of health destroys the mental health. And we did talk about mindset and shame in the previous episode. So is there a natural way to eat? Logically, it says not really. There's not one universal way. Humans adapted wildly to different diets depending on where they lived. Some thrived mostly on plants, others did thrive mostly on meat and fish or other starches depending on their region. The real superpower is adaptability. Now, what evidence shows is that humans have eaten grains and tubulars for over 100,000 years, and we kept evolving. Lactose intolerance and starch digestions are examples of genetic changes. So, believe it or not, most of the human race was lactose intolerant. Actually, almost all of Asia is lactose intolerant but they found a genetic variant somewhere in, I want to say England, where something shifted and some people were no longer lactose intolerant. I'll probably do an episode later on lactose so people can understand that eventually. But what that means is that our bodies are flexible. They're not locked into the perfect diet. The adaptability is key, but when a lot of groups shift suddenly into a Western diet, which is processed food, lots of sugar, they often develop chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, conditions that are rare in traditional diets. Even with food like red meats, nuances matter. While it's been a part of the human diet, heavy moderation of meat can links to heart disease and certain cancers, partially because the compounds in the meats and how our bodies are actually processing. So, a good rule is 80-20, where 20% of your diet maybe is something meat based, like a really small portion on your plate, where you have twice the size of different variations of vegetables. Cooking was another turning point. By pre digesting food, it gave us more calories and helpful fuel brain growth. But today, our ability to extract is so efficiency actually maybe backfired with highly processed foods overwhelming our systems. Where does that lead us? The healthiest path is often the simplest: balance eating, regular movement, listening to your body. There are diets like the Mediterranean diet where it's lots of plants, whole grains, meat, a little amount of meat line up with actually pretty healthy and sustainable health outcomes that are sustainable. There are blue zones that you can actually look into and see how all of them do eat actually very differently, but most of them have the same thing in common of whole foods and a lot of plants and a lot of grains with little meat. So most importantly, it's about stepping away from the extremes, away from the quick fix, the shame-based rules. Health isn't about chasing the next trend. It's about embracing adaptability. It's about embracing variety and balance. Now, remember, it is true. You are what your ancestors ate. We talked about this previously, and if you haven't listened to that, please go back to the first episode and you'll learn more about nutritional epigenetics. But the key takeaway is there isn't one rigid way to eat. The real goal is finding what nourishes you and your body in your life today. So, again, thank you for listening to Rewrite Rising. Remember, you don't have to get it right, you just have to start. Rewrite your health journey and rise above your past. New episodes drop every Monday and Thursday, so follow, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.